bet. Mark. So we did start. I hope you all have been following this. We've been having it every Friday night. No. Here's what happened, among other things. When did COVID start, by the way? Anybody remember? It's been 2020? 2019? 2020, and now we're 24. So I dodged a bullet for 4 years. I was really careful. Got all the shots, all the vaccinations. Went into a super monk mode where I avoided socializing, which actually was pretty easy. Very, very careful. But then it finally nailed me. When? On Valentine's Day. So here's the story. I have a little, it's not my niece, it's my niece's niece. What's a niece called? Not niece, but grandniece? She'd like that, but I don't know if grand applies. What is that called? Nobody knows, huh? Huh? Great niece? Oh gosh, I can't. Okay. The great niece. Anyhow, the great niece has a special affinity with me, and over the years we try to do something once a year special. The first time I thought I'd introduce her to ballet because I thought she would be interested in that. That was years ago, and I took her to a ballet performance called The Nutcracker. Well, you're somewhat familiar. So you're very young. We're sitting there, she's watching very diligently, and then when there was an intermission, and she looked really sad, and I said, well, why are you so sad? Aren't you enjoying it? She said, I am, but where's my nutcracker? She thought it was actually a cracker cookie that she was going to get, and was looking at everybody to see where that was. So she's grown into it. She now does ballet. And so on Valentine's Day, before she called me up, she said, Unky, we got to do Valentine's Day. You're going to be my Valentine. I said, really? What do you want to do? And she says, I have 2 tickets for the ballet in San Francisco. And she says, it's very special because of the Chinese-American ballerina, Yun Yun Tan. Some of you know, may not know. She's really outstanding. It was her last performance on stage. And so she got these tickets, and I thought, oh my gosh, it's probably going to be crowded. It's the last performance, but she had her heart set on it. So I masked up, I went over. What an error. Because she's young and doesn't have money, she got the cheapest tickets possible, which put us way, way back. I know you know the, what is this called? The War Memorial, the Opera House. Way, way, way back in the last row. If you have acrophobia, you don't go there. And you're just clinging to the railings as you sit down. The very, very last row, and it starts, and there she is. I said, where? And then she hands me binoculars, because you can't see anything there. So I'm looking through these binoculars that are steaming up, trying to watch this. She had a great time, and the next day I came down with COVID. So, and it loved me. It was very attached to me. I went for almost 3 weeks now. But finally, I think I'm free, and we're back to the Avatamsaka. What I'm going to do is, these are the last verses of the last section of chapter 9, called Luminous Awakening or Bright Enlightenment. And I'm going to review a little bit and bring us up, because it's been a long time. But two things to keep in mind here about the Avatamsaka. The Avatamsaka is always talking about Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, primarily the enlightened state and commitment and vows and practices of Bodhisattvas, enlightened beings. It's a compendium, narrative of everything they do, think, express, conduct themselves in, and it's really about this incredibly compassionate thrust of the enlightened being to teach and transform and help living beings everywhere. It is the text of great compassion, but it's also about the human potential. So it's talking about the awakened state of bodhisattvas, but it's only along a continuum of saying, and this is the basic nature and potential of any human being. is to be like this. And so on one hand, it's talking about seemingly far out states and the worlds they inhabit and the worlds they experience, which for most of us isn't our experience, but it doesn't mean it's beyond our capability. It's just not within our experience now. So it's describing that world and the experience they have in that and their vows and whatnot, but also it's meant to be a manual or a laboratory guide to self-cultivation. So the states described are actually states that are within the reach of the human. They are not beyond the human. So I wouldn't necessarily say this is, quote, a transcendental text. It's just along a continuum of a very, very basic ability up to a manifestation. In the same way, go back to the ballet. And with my binoculars, I saw Yin Yin Ta, and I thought, whoa. The human body that can do that, I can't. I couldn't even my dreams imagine doing what she was able to do with training and discipline. But she started out just as a little girl, learning to walk and whatnot. So you could see the Avatamsaka as an expression of the perfection and refinement of the human capacity. And so it's both humbling to read it and inspiring to read it at the same time. So as we go into this, we're kind of using it as a window into the world of enlightened beings. And it's also a mirror to reflect where we are along that continuum ourselves, or where we might be. And none of this is beyond the human or inaccessible, even though it seems maybe far removed as we start. So in this particular chapter, it's called Light Enlightenment, retranslated as Luminous Awakening. And in it, the essence of this is the Buddha as a teacher with his realms of disciples releases light. And this light causes them to pay attention in a way they haven't paid attention before, to draw near, and then in the light that's shed, allow them to see a little bit further and deeper than they normally would. So they get a boost. There's a kind of transference of wisdom and insight that is coming from the character and person of the Buddha. And so you could call this a little bit along the line of charisma. And it's both words and language that he's using, but it's also wordless. It's imagery, it's sensation, it's emotion, it's all of that woven in. And they're able to go beyond where they normally go with the benefit of this light. On the other hand, what's going on clearly is the light they have allows them to pick up on the light that's there. So the light within unites with the light without. And as a result, their internal light, which they cultivated to various degrees, starts to grow and increase, bathing in the light that's coming from the world honor one or the Buddha. And there's this reciprocity going on. There's this very interesting transference going on as they draw near, and it's described in this text. And so the key thing to take away from this is not so much how do I get into that light, how do I receive that, but rather how do I make myself receptive to or able to pick up on that light. Because this is the interesting part of the text. If you say it's about me, then the question is, what do I have to do? How do I have to change to access this illumination, this light? And some people feel this, for example, they do a retreat. They go on a 7-day retreat. And in keeping precepts in that retreat, focusing their minds, letting go of distractions, their light starts to increase. And at first they think it's coming from without. And all of a sudden they realize that without and within is a continuum, and it's actually catalyzing their own human capabilities. And they have a direct experience then of self-cultivation producing light. So the text here that we're looking at, the last part of this, is describing, yes, the Buddha and the light and whatnot, but also the results of those for the ones that are near. So let's just look at then, and I'm going to read maybe this last section of verses. I'm not sure which page that would be for you, in the 60s pages, somewhere around there. Tonight's begins, let me see if I can find, and I believe we've had 10 sections of verses. Avatamsaka loves 10, so I think this is the 10th of the 10. Let's see here. Yeah, so I'm looking at 64, 65 around there. And the Chinese is Yinian Puguan Wuliang Jie. My eyes are so bad. And let's just do it in English. In one thought, he contemplates limitless kalpas. He does so without going, without coming, and without dwelling anywhere. In this way, he is able to understand and know what goes on in the 3 periods of time, and transcends all expedience and accomplishes the 10 powers. Second, in 10 directions, incomparable and wholesome renown, forever left all difficulties and is always happy, goes everywhere and visits all lands to broadly proclaim the Dharma, which is thus. Third line, for the sake of living beings, he makes offerings to the Buddhas and obtains a fruit that corresponds with an intent. By the way, I highlight that that's Chinglish fruit. Let's not go into that too much, but has a result, has a flowering, a realization, an awakening. All that could be the better translation rather than the literal metaphor of fruit that corresponds with his intent. This also means that his vows have come to fruition. He completely accords with and knows all dharmas. Could be capital D and could be small d here. Could be all phenomena, all of reality, or it could be all of the teachings, capital D. And pervasively throughout the 10 directions manifest spiritual powers. Let me just pause there and just say, so as we conclude with this, it's describing, it's seemingly what the Buddha is able to do at this state of a realization. A couple themes, and I won't dwell on too long, but one thing that's really important to take away from this, I think, is that this self-cultivation, which starts with, in one thought he contemplates, and so forth, in 10 directions incomparable, leaving all difficulties, always happy. This self-cultivation completely is intertwined with the liberation of others. So this idea that, the Buddha is apart from the human or apart from living beings, what you see here is an almost inseparable intertwining of benefiting others. And that's where you see it, the line says, for the sake of living beings, for the sake of benefiting living beings. That's in the third line. So for the sake of benefiting living beings, he makes offerings to Buddhas. And so this making offering to Buddhas is basically realizing your own potential for Buddhahood. This is the offering. You're sort of giving up your petty little venal self and offering it to your larger self, which is another way of describing the Buddha within. And so why do you do this? It's for the sake of benefiting living beings. So behind this impulse for wisdom and insight is also this, and I wouldn't say it's either or, it's along with it, it's compassion, this feeling one with everyone for the sake of benefiting living beings. The other takeaway I have from this, and there's so much, I mean, as you know, I can trip out on these things and we'll never get through it, so I'm going to try to move on tonight. The other thing I want to note here is the activeness. Visits goes everywhere, visits all lands, broadly proclaim. This is very interesting because sometimes people have the notion that the Buddha's nirvana is an ultimate withdrawal and disappearance from reality, from the world, and that the Buddha enters nirvana and that's it. As a flame goes out and the Buddha's no more. Not only in the Lotus Sutra, but in this sutra too, I'm sorry, you cannot read this except that a Buddha is incredibly busy and active. This is not a retirement plan. And there's no retirement here. you would think with the accomplishment of Buddhahood, the utmost, then that would be the fruition, and you go off into whatever Pure Land condo you've imagined it to be, which to me I can't wrap my mind around because that sounds awfully boring. Sorry. But it's also boring in the sense that if you got to the point of wisdom, you also saw the interconnectedness of all beings, and you could not rest content knowing that others were suffering and unhappy and missing. So it's like, it's almost not a choice at that point. With this wisdom comes the vision of the absolute interconnectedness of myself and all beings, and it says all worlds. Though this includes the whole natural environment. You see a total interconnectivity here. So your wisdom and insight does not allow you to retire and rest on your laurels. You actually have to, and it's not have to like should. This is not this kind of compulsion. You cannot but do this any more than you can stop breathing, eating, and sleeping. It's just part of your natural, your new nature, the Buddha nature. So then I think also we could look at this when it says broadly proclaim the Dharma, which is thus. You could look at broadly, which is how my teacher would do in his vows, including teaching and transforming across all realms of existence, in the hells, the animals, the ghosts, people, and so forth, which we would say was far beyond just the human. But even with the human, his idea was it wasn't limited to a particular ethnicity or geographical area or particular gender or race or anything like that. It was to make this available throughout the world. Therefore, he pushed, nudged us to become translators and to take these particular teachings like the Avatamsaka and bring it into the world's major languages and eventually all the languages. Which is a very daunting task. We've been at it for a while, and just to translate it into English is really challenging. But that was it. Now we're going into, I think, Spanish. Jin Hui, are you translating into, what is it, obscure language where you come from? Polish. Right, so we're going to have a Polish Avatamsaka. This is, my little niece will think, is that a sausage? No, it's a Polish Avatamsaka. So there's Spanish, I suspect German. What else is being done now? French? I don't know about Italian yet. But the Buddhist Text Translation Society was founded by a teacher with the idea of making this available worldwide to all living beings. So that, you could say, is broad. Its reach is broad, broadly proclaiming. But I would say broad here also means its range. The range of ability to talk to the different cultures and different peoples through their different mores and thought ways and their values and psychology and legal understandings and everything. That's broad also. So you not only have to just translate the Avatamsaka, but you have to translate it into and through the modes and medium of the way people understand things. A self, for example, when we talk about self, very different to talk about self in America as opposed to talking about self, say, in an Indian scripture or in a Confucian setting. Self means entirely different thing. And so when you say no self, in one place it can be seen as virtuous and in a realization of your true being. In others it can be as a threat and annihilation of your self-individuality. So you have to not just take the words, but you have to get at the meanings to translate this so they have the effect, the therapeutic effect on the listeners of this wondrousness, it's called. And that's the line that's coming up, is the wondrous Dharma. So let's go on. Boy, I'm really breaking practice here, just moving along. Excuse me if I suck on a thought lozenge and then... What is this lock you gave me? Is it legal? He's my Chinese herb doctor. And so when I get sick, I go get Western medicine, but then I get these delicious Chinese herbs that I take with a huge teaspoon of honey. So, but they help. Don't be envious. Fourth line, from the first time he made offerings to Buddhas, His mind has been pliant and patient. He enters in deeply into Chan Samadhi and contemplates the Dharma nature, universally encouraging living beings to resolve their hearts on the way. And by such means as these, he quickly accomplishes the unsurpassed. Here's fruit again, but basically means full awakening, perfect enlightenment. Again, here the theme, universally encouraging beings, and by such means as these, by compassionate endeavor. So again, it's not simply going into withdrawal into a little meditation hut, or even withdrawing away from society and doing a contemplative hermetic existence, which can be a progressive step along. However, what's said here, the full realization comes from not having the duality between myself and others, between this world worldly and world transcending, between pure and impure, between engaged and contemplative. They complete breakdown into a single functioning thing. And it says, by means such as these, he accomplishes the fruit. So the idea of a bodhisattva sometimes literally translates as, if we have two, right, bodhi and sattva. In the Chinese, it's what? That was Sanskrit, by the way, bodhisattva. Okay, so what's this, that's a Chinese? Pusa. So how did they get from bodhisattva to pusa? Well, originally the Chinese did putisato. They heard bodhisattva and they said, oh, putisato. So it was sort of a transliteration. For some reason, though, Sanskrit likes to stay long, and Chinese like to crip it. So putisattva went to pusa. Buddhaya in Sanskrit, Buddhaya, it's like, yeah, Buddhaya was Fuotoya in Chinese, Fuotoya, and that became Foto, and then became Fo. So for Pusa really are not translations, but transliterations, okay. In any event, what we're seeing here is that the bodhisattva is technically an enlightened, awakened bodhi and being. That's one way. So it means a being that's fully on a path to full awakening, liberation. But it also means someone who enlightens beings. So there you can work with this. So it's someone, bodhi, it's a sattva, being who enlightens. It's also one who is enlightened. My teacher would say it is a being who becomes enlightened by and through and while enlightening others. And while and through and by enlightening others, he or she, himself or herself, becomes enlightened. So again, breaking down the this and that into a circular, non-dual. Therefore, it says, by means such as these, that's expressing that. By working to understand, enlighten, work through almost like a doctor without borders idea. Work through the sufferings and whatnot of understanding, transforming living. In the process of doing that, unexpectedly, the person doing that, he or himself or herself, gains a fuller and fuller awakening. They're not two different things, compassion and wisdom. This is very interesting. So it's almost as if the process of becoming, we'd say to our teacher, we'd say, you have to talk tonight. I'd say, well, I can't talk, I'm not enlightened. And he said, you talk all day long. You're not enlightened. Why when I ask you to talk at night? Well, it's different. He said, if you wait till you're enlightened, you'll never talk. And if you don't talk, you won't realize how unenlightened you are. So he said, talk and see how enlightened you are, and that stimulates you to become more enlightened, and people might even listen. So this expression here I really like, because it's been meaningful for me, this first line, mind, pliant, and patient. I think in English, a word that comes close is docile, if you know the word docile, docility. But it means readily absorbing something that's taught or presented. There's an openness to it, a docility. It doesn't mean naively, blindly accepting, but it means curious, infinitely curious, and a willingness to yield or cooperate because of a desire to be agreeable, or because of unnatural open-mindedness. This is a key thing that appears, and I think it's not stressed enough. When people talk about their resolve for awakening, the will to get awakened, it sounds as if it's a muscle activity of intentionality. And that is true. There has to be a steadfast intentionality to stay with this. That's given. But equally important is a softening and letting go pliancy that goes hand in hand with that softens that and allows for something to come in and penetrate and make you different than you were before. So if it's just will and intentionality, it can't sustain, it can't penetrate. There has to be this pliancy. And this is really at the heart of some of you who know the Lotus Sutra. There's a passage in the beginning of the Lotus Sutra. Again, light is released and something special seems to be going on. And who is it? Shariputra is, what's going on? What's going on? And I think it's Manjushri says, it's okay. This is a special occasion. The Buddha's going to teach something new. And Shariputra goes, well, I've learned everything. What's there new to teach? And so he starts to have this doubt. And not only he has doubts, but others in the assembly have this doubt too, because they feel as if they've arrived at the fruit. And it's a psychological state, really, that's going on. And Shariputra hangs around to hear what it is. But there's how many? I think there's 5,000. There's a large number who just leave. They leave before they even hear what the Buddha has to say. This is very interesting. They leave in anticipation that he's going to say something that they might not want to hear, or that challenges their position where they are. So this is the absolute opposite of pliancy. It's actually arrogance. It's a kind of, I have nothing further to learn. I've arrived. I'm full, and therefore there's nowhere to put anything else. And that, when willful intentionality closes down like that, it becomes arrogance. And there's a pliancy and a softness that's lost. So this is a very important quality. In the Lotus Sutra, it says the ones that stayed and were willing to listen, even though they were a little shaky, quote, they were endowed with various degrees of willingness to understand. Various degrees of willingness to understand. And it says, the powers of speech fail. No other sentient being is able to understand what the Buddha wants to move them along to at this point, except for those bodhisattvas who, in their confidence or trust, are willing to understand. It doesn't mean they just trust, but they trust that they can and could and might understand, which means shifting positions. So this relationship between belief and understanding, and actually that comes from this chapter 4 of the Lotus Sutra, which is alternately translated as belief and understanding. Very interesting. Belief and understanding, trust and understanding. It's also translated by someone else as decisive liberation. Same expression, shinje. And another translation, which I really like, is called willing acceptance. Willing acceptance. Anyhow, I just bring this out. It's basically the shin is the heart in je, to unravel or understand. So this is something that was a challenge for me because I grew up in a very dogmatic religious tradition where inquiry wasn't encouraged, and a kind of dead faith belief was, and not questioning was not encouraged either. So as I moved away from that, I was very leery of taking on a new teaching that seemed to be a religion. And so I was a little stiff, to say at the beginning, questioning. And this blend where you have trust and confidence and an openness, along with discernment and critical inquiry, a kind of healthy doubt, not a stubborn, frozen doubt, like a denial beforehand, but a healthy wait and see attitude. Wait and see. And you see this in the Buddha's own teaching, he uses the language, he says, ehipasiko, which means come and consider. Come and consider. Doesn't say, believe me, follow me. He says, think about this. What do you think? My teacher always used to say, after the talk, he'd say, so he lectures, and he'd say, niman xiang xiang, what do you all think? And it would open up a kind of, well, I have this doubt. How can you, okay, that's good. Problem is you don't doubt enough. He might put back on you. So it was like getting into that, leaving the stubbornness for an openness was a lesson for me. And it had to do also with my meditation, because when I meditated, I was using will and intention. So I was sitting stiff like a board. And he would always come up, either with his cane, or he had a little whisk, and he'd whack me. He says, soften, soften. Tai-ying, you're too hard, you're too stiff. What do you mean? And it took me a long time to realize that this was physical, emotional, and mental as well. It was all three of these had to open up and be receptive without being blindly docile and without shutting off. And so there's a kind of dynamic tension between trust and critical inquiry, between letting go and holding on, and knowing when to apply those. Anyhow, the verses I wanted to share with you tonight come from another text I use, because my two ways of doing this physically, emotionally, one emotionally, intellectually, was the Avatamsaka Sutra. This really was a softening, watering of my ideas in my mind. But also it was bowing and Tai Chi. The three of those, the Avatamsaka, for me, the Avatamsaka, Tai Chi, and bowing were my primary medicines. And these come from the Tai Chi tradition, but I want to quote them coming from the Tao Te Ching, because it kind of conveys the feeling of this. Sort of just listen to this passage. The text says, can you, when concentrating your breath, make it soft like that of a little child? It is thus that the soft overcomes the hard, and the weak overcomes the strong. When a person is born, they are soft and weak, but in death become stiff and hard. The 10,000 creatures, all the plants, and all the trees, while they are alive, are supple and soft. But when they are dead, they become brittle and dry. Truly, what is stiff and hard is the companion of death, and what is soft and supple is the companion of life. This is from the Tao Te Ching. So it's a passage I would use to contemplate. And actually, one of the gateways for me coming back in was working with children. I took a job of working in a residential treatment center for severely emotionally disturbed children, and then I was I guess you call it a governor, not a nanny, for 4 kids for a number of years. And after graduate school and all my stiff, hard studying, hanging around kids like that actually had a softening effect on me that I wouldn't have gotten just through books. Any event, I go on from the Tao Te Ching. Nothing under heaven is softer or more yielding than water. And when it attacks things hard and resistant, there's not one of them that can prevail. For when they find no way of altering it, they can find no way of altering the water. And you see this if you go to the beach. Every grain of sand, every little polished pebble there began as something bigger and sharp. And through the time and the water rushing, same when I go to Maine and the river rocks. The river rocks in Maine are all really nice and round because after centuries of the water rushing over them, everything now is soft and round. That the yielding conquers the resistant and the soft overcomes the hard is a fact known by all people, but utilized by none. So maybe one story tonight, and then I'll take a break. And hopefully Jin Chuan or Jin Wei will come up and, okay. This is how I do Chinese medicine. I just gulp it. Whew. Okay, so what I said at the beginning was when Heng Sure and I were doing the bowing pilgrimage, these are the chapters we started with, 9, and then this next week I'll finish 9, promise. And we'll also go into chapter 10, which is a really incredible chapter. The Bodhisattvas ask for clarification. Really cool. But these are where we started. And so our teacher encouraged us to see the ordinary events happening along the highway as we were bowing, connected to the Avatamsaka, and to see the Avatamsaka being expressed in the ordinary phenomena while we were on the highway. So that principle, noumena, and phenomena were intertwining. So this one has to do with this text with pliant and patient. Again, the actual physical act of doing steady bowing is a softening mechanism. It softens you just physically, because you'll wear out and tire and get really sore if you do it stiff and hard. So you have to become sort of like pasta pastel dente. You have to become like blech. And if you're like bleh and you bow, you become soft and pliant. And interestingly, the physical soft pliancy of bowing works on the heart and the emotions and the mind as well. It's very interesting how they interact. So I would recommend for pliancy the practice of bowing. In any event, this is what we were doing. So I'm going to have to read. This is actually, I'm just reading you from my journal. And we were bowing, let's see, where was this? Somewhere in the Big Sur area. And this stranger comes up, and he said, I've stopped 3 times now watching you guys do what you're doing. What are you doing? I said, well, we're explaining we were bowing. It was a pilgrimage for world peace and so forth. And he said, yeah, I watched you 3 times. And he said, could I bow with you? I was like, you a Buddhist? No. Okay. But at first, let me put it, Heng Sure wasn't talking, so it was up to me to talk and relate to everybody and to also vet. So sometimes people would come up and ask things like this, and they were hitting on us, either spiritually or they were trying to convert us or whatnot. Can I bow with you? Now that I bowed with you, have you heard about, my teacher, the way, the truth, the light of something else? So I had to be really careful. And I said, are you really sincere? You really sincerely want to do this? He said, oh yeah, I really want to do it. I said, okay, if you're really sincere, then with one mind, one heart, just single-mindedly bow and just let the bowing work on you. So we start bowing, and within, I would say, 20 minutes, a half an hour of this, a car, and my writing is so small here. A car drives up, and the guys in the car probably had a few drinks, and they're threatening and insulting. And this man, he's closing his eyes, and his hands are folded, and he's just going down in balls. And they're picking on him, not us. They're going after him. And he just patiently just keeps bowing. They jeer and they taunt and they abuse him, and he just doesn't move. He pays no attention, he keeps bowing. And so finally the men leave, and the tires squealing and the dirt flying, a cloud of dust. And then they come back. We thought they were going to come back, and they throw a full can of beer right at him, at his head. Just misses him, crashes on the ground. And then they rip out again at a high speed. Actually, if you think about it, the can of beer full like that, thrown in that way from a moving car, could actually seriously hurt or even kill this guy. This is not something to be trifled with. But it smashes his ground and whatnot. And he doesn't move. He's both pliant and patient, just as the text was saying, pliant and patient. And by the way, patience here, I think, is not just a stubborn enduring. I think it's wrongly meant. Patience here has to do with a confident trust that what I'm about, what I'm doing is grounded, it's solid, it's true, and therefore I can relax. I don't even have to worry about results. I know if I attend to this true thing, the results will happen by themselves. So patience is only possible when there's this kind of conviction of the teaching, the teachers, and yourself that you're doing this. Anyway, And then, yeah, this is funny. When it started, he said, well, what should I do when I bow? And I said, well, you could just recite Namo Guan Shu Yin Pusa. Namo Guan Shu Yin. We just did a CEI at the city around reciting the name of the Bodhisattva, Great Compassion. So as I looked at him, I saw his mouth moving. So while the beer can was flying, all this, he was quietly. He didn't say it aloud. And so he said, I'm going to go now. He said, and thank you. I'll be back again. And that was it. And he came back a couple of times, I think, as we bowed through his area, doing the same thing. Pliant and patient, never asked very many questions, just accompanied us. But in a sense, for me, he was a bit of a model. I mean, you think, well, the monks are the model for the people that are watching. But for me, it was like, here's someone who saw something that moved him. He felt very genuine and just devoted his whole heart to it while he was doing it, unmoved, and saw through the myriad things that were buzzing around him and just kept going. So to me, it was an example of pliant and patient. Anyhow, I'll stop there for tonight. We'll, excuse me, we will finish up next week. Ken, do we have copies now available for how are we going to do that for the next chapter?
So, you want it in Chinese, the one that Marty did, so that's printed, but if you want the actual book without the Chinese, we also have that.
So it's printed already, ready to go?
Yeah, I already have it.
Oh, okay, so we're ready to start. It will be Chinese with English interface.
Yeah.
And usually what we do here, and encourage you all to participate, we polish the translation as we go along. Even if you don't know Chinese, like me, even if you don't know Chinese, when you hear it in the English, if it either resonates with you or dissonates, or leaves you with a question, bring it up in class and we'll look at it, because often it's because the translation isn't really right on. So you have to remember, these are earlier translations. We're constantly refining and polishing them, but part of the polishing has to do with your response and understanding and questions around it. So don't be afraid to ask questions and make suggestions. It's a kind of shared inquiry we're doing here. And over time, these things get better and better. So we'll put the Chinese and the English. Those of you who know the Sanskrit, problem is most of the Sanskrit for the Avatamsaka has been over time lost. So I think there's only Sanskrit versions left for Dashabhumi, the 10 grounds of the 10 practices, and also for the Gandavyuha, chapter 39. There's little bits and pieces of Sanskrit for the others, but those are the only two that have survived intact. So we can't put the Sanskrit in for this. But we do have the Chinese and a rough English translation. So, hope to see you all next week. Be careful. Don't go to the ballet.
So maybe add a little bit to what Marty was saying around having a relaxed body in practice. As Marty was sharing, I was reflecting back on when I first got to the monastery, and I very much had a kind of forcing mindset in terms of meditation. And also this last month, we've been having a meditation session here at the monastery, and I was just reflecting how different it has been with this emphasis on relaxing. So I'll give a little bit of my experience going to the City of 1,000 Buddhas to do a Chan session. And the Chan sessions at CDTB are pretty tough. They start at about like 4 a.m. in the morning, and some can go to 12 a.m. at night. And it's hour sits, 20-minute walks, hour sits, 20-minute walks. Sometimes an hour and a half sits, or even 2 hour sits. And the emphasis is sit in full lotus the whole time. So every time I go, hey, whew, it's like a boxing ring. Me in my mind. I'm going to my, okay. So I'm walking around the ring, around the Chan hall. Okay, next round. Okay, sit down. Okay, it's full lotus. Ooh, got pain like 10 minutes. Oh, can I hold it? And people are saying, well, you have pain in your legs. You hammer nails in your legs and you don't move. You just stay still. Okay. okay. And, I kind of bear the pain, sit after sit after sit after sit. And, sometimes I make it through, sometimes I don't. But the entire time, I'm just really tense. And I come out of it not relaxed, not at ease, not very happy, just in a lot of pain and a kind of actually shaking in the body because it's just so painful. And I go back in the dorm and I'm just like exhausted from a day of basically fighting my body and mind. And I remember I did this for quite a few years. And I always thought to myself, am I doing Chan? Because, this is like the real stuff, practicing all day, all night. And during this last couple of weeks here at the monastery, the first thing we did for the first week was we just focused on relaxing the body. Actually, the whole time we did relaxing the body, but the first week we just emphasized that as, okay, breathe and relax. Breathe and relax. Any moment there's like, relax, relax. And there's any kind of sensation in the body, relax. There's pain in the body, relax. Don't get tense. And it's amazing that over time the body actually starts to relax and things start to open up. It's a kind of an ongoing joke in the monastery. So at one point, we were kind of, so I have to joke around. So we're meditating. I go, so round one, we just had our first sit, right? So round two. And so I told Yuan Lin, who's been at the monastery, I said, round two, second sit. And then later he comes to me and he smiles. He says, remember that video game Street Fighter? If you want to know that game, Street Fighter, he says, round one, round two. He says, round one, fight. He says, what we have is round one, don't fight. So, well, that's a good principle, which is when you start meditating, just let go, don't fight. And it seems such a simple principle in terms of, we hear this all the time in the monastery, but actually really applying it all times in our lives is very profound. What we found, just trying to apply it. The afflictions we found have a very difficult time staying in the heart when the body's relaxed. I mean, just try to get really angry and be really relaxed. It's like impossible. The body just goes, I feel so tense and uncomfortable to get angry. Why do I want to go there? Or desire, the sense of like, almost like you're losing your energy to like go out and get something. It's like, I just happy in my body, relaxed, present here. And what we found is the body just relaxed and at home just kind of becomes a base for then the mind settling and being okay. So it's something we really appreciated this last, month, just really getting a chance to relax. Still, of course, afflictions arise, things happen. People know in the monastery there's lots of activities, but the ongoing theme is just relax. Round like 20, don't fight. And I don't know, maybe I can also mention tomorrow we are planning on having another meditation day long here at Berkeley Buddhist Monastery. This is actually about round six in terms of day longs here at Berkeley Monastery in terms of a class. We actually had a pretty mind-blowing talk, maybe it was last week, by Bogdan I can't say his last name, Staszewski, who's Polish, born in the same hometown as Jing Weishu, and he talked about quantum mechanics and yogacara, or kind of a Buddhist philosophy of consciousness. And Bogdan's actually building quantum computers, and he explains like quantum computing and quantum physics. And you think Buddhism is far out reading the Bodhisattva text, but the current going theory for why quantum computers are so powerful is they access other universes. There's all talking about multiverses now. So the going theory is it accesses other universes and brings all the computational power from these other universes into this universe. That's the going theory, and we ask him, so like how much more powerful is a quantum computer than our computer now? He says, well, a gazillion times. He says that's 10 to the power of 80. says, that's the number of particles in our universe. It's like, okay. And so if you're interested, he gave the talk last, what, was that last? 2 weeks ago, and you can find it on the YouTube channel of DRBU. And in the spirit of that, we wanted to continue to explore Yogacara and consciousness. So we had, last week, we explored just kind of an overview of Yogacara, and tomorrow we'll go into the kind of, what are the qualities of the heart and the mind we want to cultivate in order to have real well-being and kind of the spaciousness of mind. And clearly one of the factors is actually pliancy, which is something like prashrabi or something like that. It's Chinese is sometimes called qing'an, this kind of light ease, the mind that's just kind of relaxed, heart and body relaxed. And so we really will kind of explore that tomorrow if people are interested. And on Sunday, we plan to go to the forest and have another day long meditating in Redwood Vihara. Yeah. So we start tomorrow, 9 a.m. Yes, tomorrow 9 a.m. And we go to about 3:15 p.m. And people are welcome to have lunch. Yes, we start 4 a.m., 5 a.m., 6 a.m. They come, already 4 hours of meditation before you show up at the monastery.
By the way, what you just said matches the fourth tonight is, I stress the pliant and patient, but the line is, mind becomes pliant and patient, then enters deeply into Chan Samadhi. So the entering deeply in Chan Samadhi comes from the soft and pliant, and entering the Chan Samadhi creates because you can't end pain through will.
Yeah. I wish I knew that before I started. I mean, actually what's interesting is oftentimes the heroic story of our tradition is Master Empty Cloud going to his Chan session to get enlightened, and the story is he fell in a river, and he almost drowned to death, he got to the monastery and he was beaten, then he sits there and he wakes up. It's like, oh, you really have to suffer to wake up. And after you really reflect, I remember reading his biography, he experienced all that pain and suffering completely relaxed. And that to me was like, oh, it's not that you're just tough and you bear and you get tighter and tighter. He had such a free mind. Even when he was going through these difficulties, he wasn't getting all wound up around it. You know, so that's something I really felt like, wow, I wish I knew that before I started meditating, and not to kind of cling to just the form of something, but see, actually, really the heart of it is learning to relax, also learning to let the heart relax, and then meditate. And you know, over time, there's a little bit more stillness.
By the way, did he talk about the interpenetrating the quantum of, you know, the breakdown of?
Yeah, he talked about some pretty far out. He came for the Guanyin session, and we asked him about, so how does Guanyin Bodhisattva work based on quantum physics? And he started going, let me think about that. So I can talk about teleportation. And he says, okay. I can't repeat what he said. We have a recording of it, but it was pretty far out. He described, you know, based on quantum physics, what's going on. And he's like, well, I wonder how the Buddha can actually know what's going on in your mind. I think he's reading the wave function before it collapses. Because the collapsing of the wave function requires consciousness. And he gives this very detailed analysis of how quantum physics could explain, you know, the possibilities of what's going on in our Dharma realm.
Or the other way around. There's a concept here we won't go into called the mutual interpenetration of matter and immatter, Newman phenomena, mutually interpenetrating without obstruction. And what it's describing is, people think, oh, it's an enlightened state. But what it's actually describing is the nature of reality. That as we sit here now, we collapse our consciousness and our identity down to me, mine, my skin, hermetically sealed, you and others. But the reality is matter and energy, as we're sitting here, are mutually interpenetrating without obstruction. Earth, air, fire, water, without obstruction. And very interesting, I met a physicist who said, right now as you're sitting here, your body is mutually being penetrated and shot through with neutrinos. You don't feel it, you don't see it, but your body has no barrier for it. So radio waves and all of this are mutually interpenetrating. As we sit here right now, you can't keep them out, you can't see them, but we're in a state of mutual interpretation constantly. So it's really this intersect here that's starting to happened, at least at the quantum level.
Yeah.
And Buddhism, okay, I'll just close with this thing. We were talking to Master Wall once about evolution, Darwin. And so if we had quantum physics, we'd talk, and he said, okay, that's possible. He said, but you have to remember that science is just a sand grain on the mountain of Dharma. And Dharma can embrace all of science, but science cannot embrace all of Dharma yet.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So it was a very interesting conversation, but not mutually exclusive, but not necessarily identical either. So, for another time. But do you have announcements? Anything else happening?
We have a Guanyin session at the 10,000 Buddhas dates, Ken? 23rd to the 30th? March 23rd to the 30th is a Guanyin retreat at the city at 10,000 Buddhas, hosted by Dharma Realm Buddhist University Extension. You can go to the Extension website, extension.drbu.edu to sign up. Yeah, you have to sign up because people need to arrange food, housing, and so forth. But it should be a really good gathering. Doug Powers will be there, Jing Wei Shu, myself as well, and a number of the Extension staff. And you get a whole week to relax and recite Guanyin Bodhisattva's name, just like this man bowing on the highway.
Without beer cans.
Without beer cans. There probably won't be any beer cans flying at you as you're bowing to Guanyin Bodhisattva. Anything else? We're going to Redwood Vihar on Sunday. If you're really interested, you should come talk with us about it. It's going to be in person only. And after that, we'll probably continue having some classes here on Saturdays. We've been finding that people really enjoy the meditations in the morning and afternoons. So once we get back from the Guanyin sessions, we'll continue to have meditation classes here and chances to meditate as a community. We last week had something like 30 people all together practicing. It's got a chi when you're meditating all day with people. So, and have a good lunch. Yeah, we'll have a very good lunch.
What?
Good lunch.
Cut me in.
Not only Dharma food, but actually real food.
Very pliant and patient.
Yeah. Your body is very pliant. Wow. What are we gonna have today?
We're going to do transference.
Is it in the booklet, the transference?
I don't believe so.
Oh no, okay. May every living being, our minds as one and radiant with light, share the fruits of peace, with hearts of goodness, luminous and bright. If people hear and see how hands and hearts can find in giving unity, may our minds awake to great compassion, wisdom, and to joy. May kindness find reward. May all who sorrow leave their grief and pain. May this boundless light dispel the darkness of our endless night. Because our hearts are one, this world of pain turns into paradise. May all become compassionate and wise. May all become compassionate and wise. Bow in respect to the three jewels.